Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call this meeting in the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment to order. My name is Rylan Johnson. I am the MLA for Yellowknife North, and our chair, MLA Jacobson, has asked me to be acting chair today just because I am here in person. Today we will receive a public briefing from representatives from the Giant Mine Oversight Board, as well as representatives from the Giant Mine Remediation Project regarding Giant Mine and the NWT's remediation economy. Please note this meeting is being live streamed, and I would like to remind all members and presenters to direct all questions and comments to myself as chair and wait to be recognized before speaking. As well, you do not have to touch the mics, but you have to wait a second. A little red light will come on. Vince on the decks there sorts out all the audio. I will now ask members to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Good afternoon, good morning. Katrina Knockleby, MLA for Great Slave.
Kevin O'Reilly, FrameLink.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the members who are joining us virtually, beginning with our chair, MLA Jacobson.
Good morning, Jackie Jacobson, MLA Nunavut.
I believe we're also joined by MLA Bonnet Rouge.
Ron Bonnet Rouge, the MLA for Decho.
Thank you. And MLA Cleveland. She will be joining us shortly, she informs me. Are there any other members on the line? Nope. Okay, thank you. With that, I will turn it over to representatives from the Giant Mine Oversight Board to introduce yourselves and begin with your presentation. Thank
I'm waiting for the mic to be activated. There we go. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good morning. And a frosty morning it is, another one. I just got back from Tucson, Arizona, and I can tell you it was frosty there too. So there's no envy to be required on that trip. My name's David Livingstone. I'm the chair of the Giant Mine Oversight Board, and got Graham Clinton, a director of the board, and Ben Nind, our executive director, with me. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm not going to go through the presentation word by word. I'm just going to try to outline it so we'll have more time for questions. The board's primary focus is on the Giant Mine, obviously, but the experience that we've had working through the Giant Mine project, we hope will apply to the number of other remediation type projects on the horizon. We estimate that something like $6 billion in opportunity over the next couple decades from the different projects that are on the horizon. Norman Wells, the remediation of the mines around Great Bear Lake, the sumps in the Delta. There are a host of potential projects out there, and quite frankly our experience with the Giant Mine suggests that we have work to do to fully capture those opportunities. With respect to our specific mandate, the board was created pursuant to the environmental assessment of the Giant Mine project, and the actual agreement was signed in 2015 and includes the Government of Canada, Government of Northwest Territories, City of Yellowknife, North Lake Métis Alliance, Yellowknife Dene First Nation, and Alternatives North as parties to the agreement. Each of those parties appoints a member, and once appointed, the directors are independent. The board is independent of the appointing parties. There are a couple key components of the environmental agreement that are of particular relevance in this case. Article 2.1 says that one of the key purposes of the board is to build public confidence in the project and enhance transparency and accountability in relation to the project. Article 2.2 suggests that part of our mandate is to that the agreement will achieve or support the remediation of the Giant Mine site in a manner that protects the economy, way of life, and well-being of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada in the vicinity of Yellowknife and other residents of Yellowknife, the Northwest Territories, and Canada. So since virtually day one, we've been focused on the remediation of the site and the benefits that those remediation activities can bring to the economy of the NWT. We estimate that the giant mine remediation will likely spend $240 million annually for the next 15 years and raise the territory's GDP by $108 million per year, while generating $60 million in labor income annually. Obviously, that's not insignificant, but we believe that the federal, territorial, and community governments are positioned to miss a large opportunity for northern economic growth. And current plans for a remediation economy is not helping. In other words, we're not anywhere near capturing the opportunities that are out there. There are enormous opportunities, obviously, and I've outlined some of the projects that are on the horizon. Problem is that we're concerned that the Northwest Territories is missing an opportunity to learn from past mistakes and to also take advantage of the opportunities presented by these remediation activities. By past mistakes, I include the failure of the Government of Canada in particular to secure adequate funds to enable the taxpayer to avoid the situation we're in now, where $4.5 billion of taxpayers' money is being spent on remediating giant mine, rather than the private sector proponents having set aside that money. You know, I don't think any of us particularly objects to the amount of money being spent, but certainly we object to the source of that funding. We all believe that the site needs to be cleaned up and cleaned up well, but it should not be at the expense of the taxpayer. Getting beyond that, though, we'll talk more about the economic side of the project and the potential benefits that we think are being missed. We've been on this particular theme since day one of our establishment. In 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, our first recommendation related to the economics of the project and ensuring that there was a plan in place to maximize the benefits to Northerners, and in particular the residents of this region. In 2020, we stated that we're concerned about the lack of vision and plans to leverage the potential of the project to contribute to the long-term economic activity in the NWT. Specifically, we questioned how Northerners can and will benefit from the care and maintenance of the site once remediation is completed, and how expertise developed through the remediation of the giant mine can be used as a springboard for evolving a northern remediation economy. In both cases, forward-looking plans are the responsibility of the Government of the Northwest Territories and the Government of Canada. In 2021, we again stated that the Board continues to support the development of a northern remediation economy using the giant mine remediation project as an opportunity to promote and develop local employment, procurement, and training opportunities and capacity. Frankly, we are disappointed by the response, both of the Government of Canada and more particularly the Government of the Northwest Territories in following up on these recommendations. We recognize that the Government of Canada's first priority is to remediate the site, get that liability off its books. It's less responsible for ensuring that the money that is spent is effective in enhancing the economy of the Northwest Territories. That is primarily the responsibility of the GNWT. And we're disappointed, frankly, again, by the performance of the GNWT in this area. I'm being blunt, as you can tell, because collectively and individually, we're very frustrated. We've been harping on this point for the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, and we're getting silence. There is some progress being made, we'll acknowledge that, on the part of Canada, but very disappointing with respect to the role of the GNWT. We were frustrated to the point that we initiated a report called Strengthening Socioeconomic Impact Reporting and Analysis for the Giant Mine Remediation Project. We engaged a consulting firm, a team rather, to do that work for us. And the overall objective of the review was to support the goal of maximizing benefits from the project. We presented this report to the proponents, GNWT in Canada, and saw no uptake of the recommendations even after discussions were held. While the project has developed a socioeconomic strategy, in the board's view, the process being followed is backward, in that an economic baseline that must first be developed with established key performance indicators before any economic strategy can be developed, let alone implemented. The appointment of Graham Clinton to my left here has enabled the board to approach this from a more rigorous economic perspective. We struggled, frankly, in the first few years and until Graham arrived, in articulating clearly what it was we were looking for. So the onus for where we stand now isn't strictly on the Government of Canada. But with Graham's arrival, we have now got the talent on the board that we need to make sure that we articulate clearly what it is we're looking for. And I'll turn it over to Graham to pick up the ball at this point, right there.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Clinton.
Yes, thank you. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Graham Clinton. I am a professional economist here in Yellowknife and have about 25 years of experience in economics of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. I was about 18 months ago appointed as a director to the Giant Mine Oversight Board. So yeah, picking up on where David left off, he mentioned the budget of this project is now estimated at $4.38 billion. Now, obviously a significant increase, and of which there is, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.6 billion remaining to be spent. Assuming a 15-year project, it's $240 million annually over the next, over that period. The size of expenditure is such that it raises the importance of tracking the flow of that money. This is what economists do. We look at how and where money enters the economy and looks at where it goes from there. And really, the study of economics is one of optimization from a mathematics perspective, but really what it is a study of choices. We have choices in our daily lives. We have choices in everything that we do, and we try to optimize those. We try to maximize the utility we get from those choices. And so when we look at this project and the money that's entering the economy as a result of it, we want to understand where is that money going, and using the term maximizing benefits, a term that I don't really like, but we want to see where is it that we're actually capturing those dollars, what segments of the economy, what industries within the economy, what from both a labor and a business perspective. Now, one of the things that we do as economists is we don't look at something what we call direct effects. That's the direct spending of the project. So that's $4.38 billion is the direct effect as that money enters our economy. We're also very interested in where that money goes after that point, and that's really where I'd say the hidden opportunities lie. Is that once the initial dollars are spent, are there other opportunities for for those dollars to be recirculated through our economy in and out of the hands of business and labor, and ultimately through into the retail world as people earn incomes and spend money locally. They spend taxes locally, or they contribute taxes locally. So this is what we've done, and in the absence of the project doing this type of work, we took it upon ourselves to build a model an economic model for the project, which does all the things that I just explained. And the point of that, again, is that we have a very formal and rigorous approach to following the money through the economy, and also out of, as we see where it leaves the economy. And it's in doing that you can really understand what maximizing benefits really means. David mentioned some of the bigger numbers, and I'll just go over them. So of the $240 million we expect to be spent annually, we estimate, or the model we built tells us that this will raise NWT's GDP by approximately $108 billion per year. Of that amount, $60 million will be spent in labor income. And if you want a point of reference, the total income earned in Yellowknife is approximately $1 billion. So it represents 6% of labor income into this city. Of course, we're not capturing all of that. All of the labor supplied to the project is not from Yellowknife, is not from the North Slave or from Northwest Territories. And therefore, we're not maximizing the benefits, okay? Perhaps it's unrealistic to expect that 100% of the labor and the business being supplied to this project would come from here. But if you talk about maximizing the benefit, that's what the maximum is. And so the question we put to the GNWT is if 100% is not possible, what is? And the way you get there is by again, investigating where the money is going, what we're capturing to date, and where small incremental changes can be made in order to capture every year or every month or every week a little bit more. I'll just briefly, regarding the term remediation economy, is something that I'm quite offended by. There's no such thing as a remediation economy. There is spending on remediation activities, and that spending goes into industries that already exist here in the Northwest Territories. Waste disposal and remediation services, non-residential and engineering construction, mining and related services, scientific and professional services, transportation, communication and logistics, accommodation and food services, security and medical services, government and non-government agencies. These are all industries that already exist in the Northwest Territories. And they were here before the project started, and they'll be here afterwards. If you want to grow the economy and take and benefit from spending that's going to occur on Giant Mine or other remediation projects around the territory, then it's about addressing supply issues in all of those industries, such that you can capture a greater proportion or greater share of the money that's entering the economy. So this is the work that the board is doing. We're working with the project on this. The models we built to date, I want to caution over-interpretation of the results that's from preliminary data sets. So we're working with the project to get more accurate data sets so we can, I don't think the macro numbers won't change, but the confidence in the numbers will change so we can speak more confidently about them. And with those numbers, we then also have something to measure against. We can understand what is actually possible. And so maybe I'll just turn it back to David to see if there's anything to summarize it.
All right, well, just to make a few more frank comments. Growth will not come from the creation of a so-called remediation economy. It will come through greater local participation of labor and business in the areas listed. This growth will not occur on its own. It will need the help of governments, federal, territorial, municipal, and Indigenous to attract, retain, and grow capacities in these areas. The largely passive approach that has been taken so far does not meet our needs as an oversight board, nor does it fulfill the federal or GNWT obligations and commitments to ensure that Northerners benefit from this and other related opportunities. It's ironic that this economic opportunity is about cleaning up a legacy mess, a mess that has landed on the laps of taxpayers. We hope our observations will spur collective action to avoid this circumstance in the future, in addition to capturing the benefits that remediation activities offer. We thank you for the opportunity to participate, and we are eager to hear some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Livingstone. I'll now open up the floor to any questions or comments from members of the committee. I'll begin with MLA O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Maybe I'll just start with the report that you mentioned in your presentation. I looked, I couldn't find it on the website. Is it available? Maybe I just missed it. Okay, if you guys could send that to us, I think I'd find that helpful. So in the presentation, though, there's a fair bit of focus about understanding, what the opportunities are, planning, and then trying to manage them. And I'm just wondering if you can talk in a little bit more detail, plain language for somebody like me, what you really mean by that. And I'll just preface it with maybe some comments. Like in terms of direct employment, are you looking for or expecting that there's going to be, information from the project in terms of, and maybe other remediation projects, information about the timing of them, the skills, the jobs that are required, what we actually have in place now. Do we actually have an inventory of workers and what their skills are like? And if we don't have those skills, where's the plan to actually put them in place? Linking it with Aurora College or the Polytechnic to develop that direct employment stuff. And then, the indirect stuff in terms of the sectors that are outlined in your presentation. I don't know if we have that kind of information available either, but is that what you expect to see or would to help maximize some of these opportunities and benefits? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Quinn?
Clinton. And apologies, I don't know if I heard the question correctly, but I'll try to elaborate to help. The NWT economy is supply driven in the sense that the demand that exists within our economy cannot be met by what we can supply. And so as a result, our ability to benefit from any activity, any spending, whether it's a remediation project or the GNWT's capital budget or plan or any other economic activity, the mining sectors, is our ability to actually to engage in that spending and to supply labor and supply business to those activities. That is the extent to which we benefit. Now, that's not to say that we, well, let's just back up a bit. When you look at when you look at the activities from a supply side, you can ask yourself questions. Well, and I think you did in your questions, like, well, do we have a pool of labor that can be activated on this project and in this community or in this region? and largely I'd say that probably the answer is no. So that is the question. So that's the question for, I suppose, the government, for the different governments at every level, is that, as money is being spent in our community, whether it's Yellowknife or Delaney or anywhere else, is how do we participate in that project such that we benefit from it? And from a macro perspective, you might look at this and say, well, the territories, here is our population, here is our labor market, here is our business community. Can these things not grow? Can they not expand? Can we not participate, attract and retain the labor and business that we need to participate in these projects such that everybody benefits more from the economic opportunities that we've created? And I'll stop there because I'm not sure if I'm going down the path that you're on in terms of a response.
Thank you, Mr. Clinton. Any follow-up, Emily O'Reilly?
Well, thanks. I think, the questions that I really have are probably for the folks sitting behind you, so that are going to come. But maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about the model and I think I heard that you are going to get some additional information from the project in terms of their expenditures over time and for different kinds of activities and services and work that needs to be done at the site, essentially. So what can the model do in terms of our understanding of where we can tweak things to, where's the low-hanging fruit in terms of where we can boost employment or the ability for, maybe it's just incremental improvement to some services that would allow for more contracts to be retained locally. How's maybe you can just explain for us how the model's going to help with that, and if you have any kind of preliminary thoughts in the work that you've done so far about where some of the low-hanging fruit might be. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Turn it over to Mr. Clinton.
Clinton, yes, I can answer all those questions. So the model, quite literally, it's some people would describe it as an accounting model. It quite literally tracks the flow of a dollar through the economy. I won't get into sort of the technical jargon of direct and indirect and induced effects and definitions of those things, although perhaps it would be helpful. When a dollar is spent on a particular activity taking place on site, let's say a drilling project or surface care and maintenance, a company is awarded that contract, and they're paid. And a part of their business is they have labor, they have machinery, they have they make profits. And they also have to, so that machinery depreciates over time. They have inputs that are required to conduct their business. They buy fuel, they buy different services, they have to repair their equipment, maybe they send their labor out for training, maybe they have to supply their staff with certain tools. So in conducting their business, their own business of drilling or care and maintenance, they then have to go out into the economy and purchase their own goods and services in order to fulfill the contract. The Northwest Territories economy is small and it's not particularly complex. And so our ability to supply the goods and services that these direct contractors need is limited, but it's a part of the economy that has a great amount of potential and one that's largely ignored. We spend a lot of time trying to, if you allow me to game the system such that local contracts have let's say an unfair advantage over outsiders. And there's a lot of work and effort put into that. Very little effort put into where the money goes after the original contract is signed. And so in a southern economy, the indirect effects often exceed the direct effects, so that money turns over and over and over again as it sort of filters through the economy. Here, of course, in Northwest Territories, we don't have a manufacturing base, so ultimately, lots of the goods you purchase have to be manufactured, and so that's where the benefits go. But so particularly on the supply side, there's a lot of areas in which we can provide services. Sorry, I said supply side. On the service side, there are a lot of services that could be provided here, and so what the model does is it looks at how, for example, a drilling company, the typical drilling company in the Northwest Territories, it knows, Statistics Canada tracks this information. So it understands over decades how drilling companies spend money. So the model then looks at, of the places they spend money, which industries or sectors actually exist in the Northwest Territories that could benefit from that. And it assumes that based on the expenditure profile of past drilling companies, where we would expect those dollars to flow. And also tracks how they flow out of the territory into different economies, whether it's Alberta or Ontario or Newfoundland or wherever. The model traces every single one of these transactions and then sort of summarizes them. So we get a macro look at direct, indirect, and induced effects. But if you want to, but I've said, so the complexity of where money goes is such that it's too much for our little brains to sort of handle. So the model does all this for us. But you can get in there and say, okay, you can actually look at, there's, I think, 259 or 279 industries in Statistics Canada's sort of input-output structure. So we understand at a fairly minute level where money is going, and we know which industries exist in the territory, and so you can do the work to figure out where that money is going, and then you can get down to, oh, look, there's money being spent on equipment rentals. Oh, well, in Yellowknife, that's Ron's automotive, and you say, well, how do they do business? Is there opportunities for them to do more business such that they have more employees and whatnot? So that's what the model does, and I think that's how it becomes useful.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I'll turn it over to Emily Knuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Good to see everybody again, and I know I've chatted with you before, Mr. Graham, on issues facing the North and the mining economy. I'm going to try not to get too much into my own history with Giant Mine. I started there as a consultant myself, working for the technical advisor. I've had a long time working on site and then as well bidding on projects and feeling that frustration when it's very clear to me that despite a little sort of the lip service around wanting to hire local and use local people and build that capacity, it was always seemed to be about the bottom line, and that was money. And I do recall at one point, and I know it's been a convoluted project and I'm trying not to point fingers, but I do remember at one point being told by the person administrating the contracts that the Indigenous component of our bid only came into play if everything else was equal and they needed a tiebreaker, which was completely against what I had been led to believe as when we first started this conversation about remediating Giant and how much money that was going to put into the economy 10 years ago or so that started to really pick up. And it just felt like it was a lot of, we're going to do this, and it was a great opportunity that I felt was missed. And it was really missed right at the start, I think, of putting in a construction management contractor that is not from the North, is not Canadian as far as I'm even aware. Okay, I do apologize if I do not have all of the facts right, but I literally was meeting with people and bidding contracts that have been flying up from Calgary. So what you're saying really does resonate with me on that project. I don't really, as an engineer, put a lot of weight into what people want to call things. I just want to get stuff done. And so it wasn't really apparent to me around the term remediation economy and really what that impact was going to have or what that kind of meant and signaled to people. And here we are trying to fight this battle around our resource extraction sector to, you know, show people that things have changed since the time of the giant mines and we're not going to have these huge legacy projects to clean up anymore, including our diamond mines, which are quite inert, really, when you look at them from a mining perspective. I know there's a footprint there, et cetera, but there's no tailings ponds, you don't have the chemical issues, et cetera. So I guess, I know this is more about, and there's a huge amount of injection of cash into our economy from Giant particularly, but as far as the lifespan of a longer sort of remediation economy, for lack of a better term, and maybe this is more directed for Mr. Clinton, is this something that we sort of see for the next couple years and then it's just going to sort of be gone? Or do you think there's a way to parlay, other than I know we'll be learning skills through that and building that capacity with our people, but is there a way to then, you know, change that or pivot that at that point into some sort of other type of economy, whether that's exportation of skills or I'm not sure. So I'll leave it at that and see what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Knockley. Who wants to take it? Mr. Clinton?
That's great. Again, I'm not sure if I got the question correct. There's no doubt there's a lot of money going to enter the economy as a result of remediation activities, and that we should be we should do everything we can to position our resources, that is our labor and our capital, such that we can take advantage of that. I will say this, that it doesn't take the remediation economy to create excess demand in our economy. It's here now. And so the types of training that and business development that we need in these areas that I listed I'll read them again because I think it's worth noting. These are different industries according to how I view the world as waste disposal and remediation services, non-residential construction, other engineering construction, mining services, scientific and professional services, something that the territory lacks, transportation, communication, logistics, accommodations and food services, security and medical services, government and non-government. These are all areas where we currently cannot supply the demand that's being needed in all of those areas. And so what I'd like to stress is that this action that you're looking at, or this remediation economy that we're looking at, it's here. It was here before, it's here now, it's going to be here in the future. And when spending stops for remediation, it'll go somewhere else, and we'll still lack supply to provide that sort of everything we can. So we're still not benefiting. There's a vacuum in our ability to grow and to I think more appropriately respond to the economy that we've developed and that we nurtured, or sort of been placed in our laps in some cases, however it manifested itself. So while I can appreciate, yes, like there is a gap in terms of understanding where this money is going and how to properly prepare for it. But I would argue that gap exists today and existed yesterday and it'll exist tomorrow, and is something that we should always be working towards, whether it's this pot of money or another one. For this particular one, investing in those particular industries within our economy will benefit all measure of different activities that are taking place here in the territory, whether it's remediation or the next resource development opportunities that come our way, or something else. The GNWT spent in the last 2 years a billion, or had a $1 billion capital plan, correct? That is an economic opportunity for the labor and businesses that we're talking about exactly here in the remediation economy. So where is the interest around building up the capacity to take advantage of the capital budget? And so this is not to be I don't know, however it is that I'm being, but as an economist, the reality is these are efforts that are they're needed regardless. And I think that that's an important thing that we need to get across is that understanding the economics of the territory is the first step in understanding how we can actually help us do this, reach this goal of maximizing benefits.
All right, just a
Of course, go ahead, Mr. Livingstone.
So what Graham is getting at is, where's the strategy for doing this? You know, the project team has a strategy for how it spends the money, but where's the strategy for capturing the benefits of that spending? And that's where the GNWT has the primary responsibility. It's not the federal government that takes it from that point, unless you're going to abdicate those responsibilities to the federal government, which I don't think would be wise. So we're now looking at this this kind of well, we characterize it as a passive approach by the GNWT. Where's the strategy for building the capacity to capture the opportunities that the giant mine and the Norman Wells pipeline and oil field remediation, the sumps, the abandoned wells in the Cameron Hills? Where's the strategy for capturing more of the benefits that will arise from those activities? It's not a federal responsibility to do that, in our view. It rests squarely with the GNWT. And that's what we're trying to articulate. There's this huge opportunity, and it's slipping through our fingers. And that's very frustrating. As a longtime resident, all three of us have been here for decades. And Giant Mine is in our backyard, literally. It's not satisfactory to, the status quo is not satisfactory. People need to do better. We're doing what we can to bring the issues to the table, to develop a model that, quite frankly, should have been the responsibility of the project proponents. But there was no take-up, so we're working on it ourselves. That's I would say a statement of failure on the part of the project, the broad project, the project that the GNWT is a partner in. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Livingstone. Any follow-up, Emily Knockleby?
Thank you for that. I often sort of half joke the GNWT's motto should be we react, not plan. And I see that in the flooding, and I see that in other areas. I get that it's a big ship to try to move and get things, but there is a real resistance to change, and I think I've really seen that over the last 4 years in my political role. I agree with everything that you are saying. It is one of the reasons that I run, and one of the reasons why I continue to push for that Northern Benefits economic, but there is a lot of that gaming that happens. I mean, all the consultants kept telling us, oh, you got to play the game, you know, you put your one person local in, and then when that person can't, you know, fulfill 20 different projects that you've won, you start bringing people in and you get your change orders. So I see that as a huge issue, and has been an issue at Giant. I mean, we've gone past the days where when I started there, it was cutting a check to the local Indigenous group, and, you know, really not a lot of meaningful engagement there, to actually, you know, does seem to be a lot more Indigenous involvement. So I do want to give kudos and praise to the staff for that, and the people working on site for that. But I guess really what I hear, and maybe just more of a comment, is that it's if we really want to build the capacity in the Northwest Territories, it comes back to our education system, and we're not graduating people in the Northwest Territories that can then go on to become, you know, these specific type of professionals that are needed for a giant mine. And even just, you know, getting into trades takes a very, you know, a level of math that is not really at times being provided in our smaller communities and such. So I just want to say I agree with everything that you're saying. I'm glad that there's actually a model now, and we can get some data-driven facts going and that indirect benefits. And I would say that as an assembly, we've been fairly live to that conversation around the indirect benefits of the different industries, probably more particularly around mining itself versus this part of it. But I can't agree more. So I guess I'll just leave it at that, and I'll continue to try to push to have that retention here. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily and Ockleby. Are there any questions from the members online? I'm just noting we do have another group of presenters, so are there any further questions from the committee? Emily, all right? You will...
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, is it too late in the project to steer the ship in a better direction? Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Livingstone, I'll let you...
Yeah, Graham Clinton. Of course, it's not. In part because as this meeting's being held, we're talking about this spending in these areas to last for many decades, and even this project is, it's 15 years and potentially even more. And contracts will come and go, and there will be opportunities that arise. A couple of points, just in terms of the procurement. Like I would say what I've observed, to Katrina's point, is there has been significant changes in those areas, as you noted, and I've actually been impressed with the growth of the local capacity to bid on contracts, and we're actually seeing that. So that's a good thing. But I think more to the point, maybe this is to Kevin's question. I'll use if we go back 25 years when the diamond mines were first being developed. There is a true enthusiasm, I would say, an energy in the Northwest Territories around taking advantage of that opportunity. The amount of the level of effort, and I'm not talking about personal effort, that went into helping bring people into the labor market who prior to that probably had no vision of actually entering the labor market. We coaxed them into the labor market through training and employment opportunities. The amount of money and energy spent in building particularly economic development corporations, but local businesses up in order to take advantage of the opportunities presented through the rise of the diamond mining. That was really something, I think, for at least a decade. From the late 90s to the end to just around the first recession, 2008, the energy spent was impressive, and it produced results. And the economy went through 4 or 5 years of sort of somewhat of disarray, I'd say, as there's a recession upon recession. And I would argue that our enthusiasm ended and has never returned. And so here we are talking about the opportunities of presenting ourselves and what can we do about them. Well, first we need to grow our level of enthusiasm and energy around trying to do the things that we were doing 25 years ago, because it's needed again today. We need to figure out how to bring more people into the labor market, how to nurture businesses such that they can grow and flourish and ultimately stand on their own, such that they can compete in the absence of any rules and regulations to ensure that they win a contract. I think this 25 years ago, that was the whole point of joint ventures, is to and the push to bringing in particular Indigenous businesses into the market initially with heavy management fees to their joint venture partner, but the idea that over time they would grow up and mature and stand on their own, and then ultimately flourish with whatever economy is here or elsewhere. And yet now we're almost back to where we started. We're creating JVs that are almost meaningless because the system has pushed us in that direction. The point is winning the contract, not in making sure that the benefits are entirely local. And so somehow we've lost our way in that area. And I think in terms of, is it too late? Of course it's not too late, but it's not going to happen without a certain level of energy or reinvigoration of whatever it was that existed 25 years ago to say like, oh, we really want to take advantage of this because it really is an opportunity. And I'll just leave it there. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Any follow-up from Leo? Mr. Livingstone, final word.
Yeah, to paraphrase Graham, better late than never. But it's not going to happen on its own. Leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of committee, Mr. and Mr. Clinton and Mr. Livingstone. Thank you very much for all your work and for presenting here today. I'm going to take a 1-minute break and we can just swap out presenters. Good morning. I'll call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment back to order. We will now hear from the representatives from the Giant Mine Remediation Project. Please introduce yourselves and proceed with your presentation. And Ms. Weaver here will control the slides, so just say next slide, and it'll switch over. Turn it over to
Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to have some brief opening remarks, and then we'll go through a presentation. And want to thank the previous presenters as well for thought-provoking presentation, and look forward to discussing those points as well. Want to thank you for the invitation to present on the socioeconomic aspects of the Giant Mine Remediation Project. My name is Julian Canigan, and I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change with ENR, or Environment and Natural Resources. With me today are Ms. Natalie Plato, Deputy Director for the project, and Mr. Andre Toriansky, Socioeconomic Lead for the federal government. Also with me from ENR is Ms. Erica Nuusanen, Senior Advisor for the Giant Mine Remediation Project. So as a co-proponent on the project, the GNWT plays an active role in working groups and senior advisory committees to ensure the site is safely remediated and that Northerners can benefit from the economic opportunities that this project brings. I'll now turn it over to Natalie and Erica, who will provide you with the presentation.
Great, thank you, and good morning. Could we have the next slide, please? Is it going to come? Okay, there we are. Great. What we thought we'd walk you through today was an overview of where we are at with the project in terms of where we're at in the remediation, talk about a bit of the public use area, thought it would be of interest to the group, and of course talk about employment, training, and contracts to end us off. Next slide, please. I just wanted to introduce ourselves. So the Giant Mine Remediation Project is led by Canada and the GNWT as co-proponents. So we do have our project team up there. These are all Yellowknifers, with the exception of my director, Chris McInnes, is located in Ottawa, and I am the deputy director led by my team at Canada. We also have, of course, the GNWT has two staff dedicated to the Giant Mine Remediation Project, Eric Nuusanen and Jeff Rosnowski. And we also have Parsons, which we've heard a bit of talk about Parsons. Parsons is our main construction manager. They are hired by Canada to administer the contracts. They don't perform any of the work on site, they just manage our contracts. So they are a very small team. And as I think alluded to earlier, they are a global firm, but our head office for Parsons on this project is in Calgary. But as part of their contract, they were required to open a Yellowknife office. So they do have a Yellowknife office staffed by Garrett and Mr. Bromberger. But they are a very small team. They don't perform any of the work. And that, I think, also alluded to was when we put that contract out, it didn't get any local bids, and there was a very good reason for that, because none of the local firms actually wanted that job because it's a small contract. It doesn't perform any of the work. They are just administering the contracts. But they are part of our team now, and we work to deliver the project. Next slide. So just in terms of people who aren't familiar with the project, the mine operated until 2004, at which point Canada and the GNWT became co-proponents and took Canada accepting liability. We took till 2020 to get all our permits and licenses through the environmental assessment process, and we actually began remediation in 2020. The project is now estimated to take till 2038. We've heard, new project schedule and whatnot is going to happen, but I'll just go to the next slide, please. Once we got our water license and land use permit through after the EA, we did revise our project schedule. It is now till 2038, which came out this year. And there are many reasons for our revised project schedule, but the major one I think that would be of interest to this group, and it's the major one overall, was to maximize local and regional participation, to make sure that we could spread the contracts out, to ensure that there were opportunities should there be people available to do that, as opposed to trying to push it through in 9 or 10 years. We have extended the project till 2038 to make sure that local capacity has the ability to participate. So I don't think anyone's interested in the details of the project, but if you are, I could certainly send the schedules around. They're available online. But basically, from now till 2038, there will be work taking place at the site. Type of work: contaminated soil remediation, filling the pits, deconstruction of buildings, and most importantly, freezing the arsenic trioxide. Page down, or next slide, please. Just to highlight We do a lot of engagement. That is one of the leads of my group is to make sure we have engaged and we keep local stakeholders and rights holders involved. This slide just summarizes the engagement we've done over the years. We did a very extensive surface design engagement back in 2014 to 2018 where we took input from all our rights and stakeholders and adapted our plan to ensure that their voices were heard. And we continue to do that. We have a socio-ec working group, a socio-ec advisory board, a general working group. We do have a lot of engagement and input on the project, so that is something that has developed over the last decade and continues to go and will continue through the life of the project. Next slide, please. So what have we done so far? In the last 2 years, I have indicated we've started remediation. The items on the left are what we have done in the last 2 years. We have started, there are 15 chambers of arsenic trioxide. That is one of the cornerstones of this project, is to freeze those chambers. So we have, to do that, we have to build freeze pads, what we call freeze pads. So it's a level area so the drill rigs can get in where they drill the thermosiphons around the arsenic chambers. So we've frozen one pad, has been completed. We also constructed an on-site landfill for the placement of all the building debris, non-hazardous debris on-site. All that will be contained on-site. Anything hazardous will be shipped to a southern disposal facility with the exception of asbestos. That will be placed in the on-site landfill as well, which is according to the regulations. We've also continued and working on backfilling high-risk areas of the underground that need stabilization. And we have begun building construction. We call it the town site deconstruction, but that's our name for it. You won't, the buildings at the town site you probably that are visible to the public haven't come down. They will be coming down this spring, but a number of buildings in that work package have started to come down. And the reason that has happened is coming this year is the beginning of our water treatment plant. That is one of the other key milestones or keystone pieces of the project is a new state-of-the-art water treatment plant, and that is something that we want to get done sooner. So the contract for that is out right now. I think Andre will speak to that right now. It closes in a few weeks, and it will be a big contract, but we want to begin that work this year. So a building had to come down. We don't have a lot of space on site, even though everyone thinks it's a big site. There's not a lot of area to work to around the site, so we will begin constructing the water treatment plant this year. So, of course, it is a long project. We've got 15 years left. There are a lot of activities to do. Covering the tailings, for instance, is one. Freezing the arsenic chambers, as I mentioned. The remediation and removal of contaminated soils is a big piece as well. Building demolition. We want to do some work at the town site area, covering up any contaminated sediments and remediating Baker Creek. So that's just a hint of what's to come. I won't get into the details. I know we're running out of time as well. Next slide, please. So these are just some photos to give you a visual of what work has happened. You can see on the left before pictures of the AR1 freeze pad, and on the right is actually an artist's rendition. It's not actually actuals, which I think we have actuals in the next picture. So page down, please. This was what it looked like, what it looks like now. So it's a pad, but from an engineer's perspective, Katrina, you'll probably, it looks good. So that one is ready for the drilling of the thermosiphons, and we'll have to do a number of other pads. I believe there's 4 to 5 to prep the area for the drilling of the thermosiphons. Next slide, please. The landfill, as I mentioned, before and afters. The after is an artist's rendition, so it's just the base that is prepped and receiving, so the landfill will receive waste for the next number of years, and then when we are done the project, the drawing on the left, or the artist rendition on the left, will look similar. Next slide, please. Just some photos to what it looks like now. Well, that was last summer, showing the placement of some of the shredded tires and the waste from around the site. We have numerous waste piles on site that will be collected and placed in the on-site landfill. Next slide, please. The underground backfilling has been going on for a number of years. It happened prior to remediation as well as an emergency, what we called emergency works or site stabilization, to ensure that the the site was stable, but this work continued last year and will wrap up very shortly, which it involves basically pumping a mixture of tailings and cement product into the underground to stabilize it so it doesn't move. As I mentioned, the town site deconstruction started last fall and will continue into this year. Next slide. Obviously, this is part of a building deconstruction. That was the old administration building. It was demolished or deconstructed. We don't use demolish on ours because we do take everything down very carefully. That is where the new water treatment plant will go. So that was taken down last summer. Waste segregated, placed in the landfill as appropriate. So that's just a very quick overview of what's happened in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what's coming next? As indicated, the water treatment plant will be constructed in 2023 with the expected completion date in 2025, commissioning in 2025, and full operation in 2026. So that will be a big milestone for the project. The current water treatment plant on site was built by the mine, I believe in the 80s, and is certainly at the end of its lifespan. Of note, the new water treatment plant water quality will be vastly improved. Right now, our water quality meets the old water license from the mine. The new one, through the EA process and water licensing process, our discharge will be 10 parts per billion, which is the drinking water standard for arsenic. So that will be a significant improvement. Next slide. This just shows various site infrastructure from 2023 to 2027. All site infrastructure will be collected, consolidated, recycling where we can. We certainly hope to recycle, we're planning to optimize recycling. Hazardous materials will be removed, and the remaining waste will be placed on the on-site landfill. Next slide, please. Contaminated soils. Remediation, that's one of our bigger pieces. It will take a lot of time. Plans to take place from 2024 to 2033. Next slide, please. And then the freeze of the thermosiphons and the arsenic trioxide. So it will take, as I said, the freeze pads need to be constructed first, and then the installation of the thermosiphons will take place from 2026 to 2035. Just item that I like to point out is on the right. That's an artist rendition, but that's what the thermosiphons will look like. There will be a lot of thermosiphons on the site. Right now, the current count is over 800, so there will certainly be a visual to remind us what the site looks like. Page down. Or sorry, slide down. So the open pits, through that engagement I talked about earlier, one of the consensus wants from the community rights holders, stakeholders, was to fill the pits. So the open pit filling will take place from 2027 to 2034. We have 7 pits, well, we have 8 pits, 7 large ones that need to be filled, so we're going to need a lot of material to fill the pits. So it will take some time. Our main objective is to, we don't want to dig a pit to fill a pit, is to use material we need in the construction of the rest of the sites, like what we consider, byproduct material to fill the pits. We still will require some additional fill on site, so we will have to develop some quarries on site. Currently, right now, we are obtaining our fill off-site through local quarries, but we're hoping in the next few years to switch to on-site use. Next slide, please. The tailings ponds, there are 4 large tailings ponds on site. Through our engagement with rights holders and stakeholders, one of the tailings ponds, the South Tailings Pond, which is the one to the south, obviously on this, the one farthest to the bottom of the page on this slide. We're going to relocate that tailings pond into the tailings pond right next to it, into the central pond. And then the remaining ponds will be dried out, and then they will be covered with a geotextile layer, a clay layer, and a rock cover. That's a bit of a change from our original plan. We're going to do a rock cover as opposed to a vegetative cover, and that was based on predominantly input from the Yellowknives Dene, who did not want a vegetative cover. And that's more so they want the remembrance that there is tailings there. They don't want it to look lovely and attract animals and humans. So the project did agree with that. Baker Creek will be remediated from about 2029 to 2038. That will be one of the later pieces coming on the site, only because we want to start at the upper Baker Creek and work our way down. The sediments are contaminated, and we also want to do some redesign work to increase the floodplain, so it has a floodplain and can handle water indefinitely or going into the future. So this will take approximately a decade to do that work and will be one of the last pieces in the project. These next few slides just are some artist renditions of what we think that it will look like, specifically showing before and afters of the town site area. On the left is the current, and then on the right is an artist rendition of what it will look like going forward. We will have a cover on the sediments in that area, and that was based on human health risks that people use the area. We don't want them to come into contact with the sediments to protect human health, as well as I think Erica will present on this in a minute, that a new boat launch at the Great Slave Sailing Club and rerouting of Baker Creek to enter at its more natural alignment. Next slide, please. Again, some artist renditioning showing Yellowknife Bay. This is farther up the site. The item of note here is on the right. This is an artist rendition, is showing there is an old foreshore, what we call the foreshore tailings, were deposited right into the bay. So we will be putting a cover on that as well. And that will happen 2029 to 2033. So that will be a visual difference in the bay there, that there will be an additional cover. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already with me. So again, this is another artist rendition just showing an overall, just to get an idea that there will be some changes to the shoreline, but those will be an engineered cover to protect any contaminated sediments that are there. So that's a really quick overview of the project. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Erica Newsonen, who's going to give you an overview of what the town site and the public use area will be.
Go ahead, Ms. Newsonen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, and thanks for having us. It's my first time here, so happy to be here. We thought we would take the opportunity to walk you through the public use site, which is the current public boat launch, and then the Great Slave Sailing Club, and how we have met our commitment to ensure that public access to the water remains open throughout the years of remediation. And just want to walk you through 3 slides. I was going to do a laser pen to guide you through, but I'll just walk you through with describing the colors and describe the next few years, what that will look like. So on the first slide, Phase 1, which is currently what the site looks like out there right now up until July 2028. So the green area is what we've categorized as accessible. And so right now we have the boat launch being accessible, and the current users are using their site how they choose right now. The orange area are areas where we do have active construction, and Ms. Plato described about the activities in the town site with some of the buildings, and so that area is actually blocked off regardless, because it is under site care and maintenance. And so status quo up until July 2028. The purple is anticipated construction. It's not happening right now, but we do anticipate in the waterworks happening there, and you'll see the other locations, and that's just the deconstruction of those buildings. Next slide. So now phase 2, here we go, getting into some remedial activities that will actually impact public use. So again, the orange area is active construction, and you'll notice the Yellowknife Historical Society building, the museum in the square green box. The project's made a commitment to ensure that access remains for that museum, and we will ensure that there's a 1 meter buffer around that building that we won't be remediating any contaminated soils, and ensuring that the integrity of that museum stays intact while the rest of the soils around it are cleaned up. Right now, the Historical Society has a bunch of equipment and their display in the parking lot. That will continue to remain open during these 2 years from 28 to 30. Where we'll see the biggest disruption is really the sailing club. And so access to the sailing club will be prevented during these years. However, we work with the Historical Society and the Sailing Club on a regular basis, and we meet with them, and so we've come to an agreement where they are comfortable using the public boat launch and is suitable for their sailboat launches and all of that. So during those 2 years, we will be cleaning up the soils, and also the project has made a commitment to build a boat ramp in the Sailing Club area that is comparable to the current boat launch that is being used now. This is in anticipation for the next phase to ensure that public continues to have access. Next slide. So now we've switched back and forth. The Great Slave Sailing Club will have access to their location as well in May 2030. However, they will be sharing the site with all of the public, and the public will be using that newly constructed boat launch in that area. Again, we've been working with the historical folks and the sailing club to ensure that the roadways will still be accessible to get to the waterway, and we're looking at what we can do in terms of parking and accommodating now public use in that area. Again, to the orange area on the left there will be a lot of activity, and as Ms. Plato mentioned, it's soils, we have Baker Creek work, buildings are coming down. There is a number of different activities that will just prevent public use in that area altogether. So as of June 2038, all will go back to quote-unquote normal, and the public boat launches will remain as is, and Great Slave Sailing Club has a boat launch there in their site as well. And that's it on that. Thank you. And then I'll hand it over to Mr. Toransky to talk about our social ec details, training, and contracting. And I'll just mention in your package, you would have received a social ec snapshot as well. It's an activity highlight. And so Andre will be walking you through that and walking you through some of our stats. So I'll hand it over to Andre now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Toransky.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. It's my first time here as well. Andre Troyansky, the economic lead for the project with the federal government. Before I jump into my presentation, I just wanted to address was a question that Mr. Riley raised regarding low-hanging fruit from contracting point of view. So GNWT's Department of Industry, Tourism and Infrastructure, Investment, did analysis of Parsons, our main construction manager, of their contracts that they've issued since 2017, December 2017, since they took over, and up until some point in 2021. This was a request made by our rights holders and stakeholders to have an independent look at our contracting. And this report is publicly available, but I believe you have it in your package, and if you don't, it is on the website. In that report, they address a couple of potential contracts that could be considered as low-hanging fruit, just because of the lack of capacity in the region for it, but for the most part, it's drilling. Ms. Plato mentioned that there's going to be 800 or so thermosiphons required on the site. Each thermosiphon requires drilling, so that's a lot of drilling coming up. So those contracts consistently tend to go down south. The other two are surface and water and air surface monitoring and air monitoring as well. So that's technical expertise that's also lacking in the north. So those are some of the things for consideration. So in terms of my presentation, we can go over the snapshot. Thank you. So what you see in front of you is our snapshot document that we produce on a regular basis. Different elements of this snapshot are updated at different points of time. But the first page essentially touches on overall activity highlights, socioeconomic highlights, like our committee meetings that we have, the contribution agreements that go out to our stakeholders and rights holders, as well as things that the main construction manager Parsons undertakes, which one of the most important things that they do to get the word out there on upcoming contracts is Industry Day, something that we've been holding on an annual basis. Even during COVID, they were done virtually. The last one was done in person here at the Northern United Place in November of last year. And there's a commitment to continue to do that, to get the word out there. And I believe that in the last Industry Day, they looked at upcoming contracts for 23 and 24. The next section in the snapshot touches on current and recently completed contracts. I'll be touching on some of those later in my presentation, but you can see really a breakdown of who it went to, what the current contract value is. That's important to note because a lot of the contracts that we issue undergo an extension period as well, so that value continues to go up. And then also who the contractor was and how do we categorize them, whether they're Northern Indigenous, Northern non-Indigenous business, whether they're a Southern business, and etc. And the last section in the report is a combination of pie charts, just very high level look at our annual performance on a fiscal year basis from employment, training, and procurement perspective. But I do want to say this is a very high level representation of it, just meant to be a quick look. We do provide reporting on an annual basis that we submit to the Giant Mine Oversight Board, an extensive report listing out details on all our key performance indicators that we have a number of, and everything is reported there on an annual basis. And those annual reports are a snapshot of a fiscal year period, so that's also important to note. So from April 1st until March 31st. Can we go to the presentation, please? So while the presentation is loading, socioeconomics itself from the project has grown substantially since it was picked up around 2017, 2018. Originally, it was done in combination with engagement, and then the team has substantially grown. Not so much on the CERNAC side, but we grew it through NWT, through PSPC, our other federal department, as well as Parsons. And the team is, I would say, around 10 individuals at this point. And we have also 2 committees dedicated to socioeconomics that we are in collaboration with our rights and stakeholders. So it's the Socioeconomic Working Group and a Socioeconomic Advisory Body. Both groups have been established since 2018, and we've consistently met with those groups as per schedule. So the Socioeconomic Working Group meets every other month, and Advisory Body meets every 3 to 4 months. We just held both of those meetings just this month. But the intent is to go into, for the working group, the intent is to go into a lot of detail when it comes to any new initiative. So for example, I'll be touching on targets later in my presentation. Those targets were developed with both of those groups together. That's not something that the project came up with on our own. Those targets were recommended and reviewed in a substantial detail by both of those committees and finally approved by the project team and adapted. And yeah, so that's an example of how we usually initiate any socioeconomic activity. We also review our stats and upcoming contracts with those committees as well. One thing that we're currently doing with both of those committees is reviewing and updating our socioeconomic strategy, which was originally published in 2019, September 2019. And we are doing a 5-year update to it so that it'll be valid until 2028, and we'll review it afterwards as well. And this strategy is going to be a public document once we release it, which is due April 1st. We are going to make it a public document. We just need to make it more presentable rather than just a Word draft document. So thank you. So moving on to the next slide, please. So for jobs, one unfortunate difficulty we face is, unlike a diamond mine, we cannot hire individuals directly ourselves. Parsons, as Ms. Plato mentioned, does the administration of the contracting, but they don't hire the employees. They themselves have a small team that does this. But employees on site are hired by the contractors that they're employed under. However, we can encourage, and we do encourage, Indigenous employment training and procurement subcontracting through what we call Indigenous Opportunity Considerations. It is an element that's included in every single one of our contracts. I believe it was referenced early on during the Giant Mine Oversight Board's presentation. But overall, Indigenous Opportunity Considerations in the past used to be I believe up to 15% of the technical points, the 70%, which is technical, 70%, which is what the total for technical points is on a typical tender. It has now been taken out of that 70%. It is now out of the 100% of the total, and it can go up from 15 up to 35%. So that's a substantial component of a tender, of a bid. So that encourages contractors really to pay attention to that element and try to include that in their bid. We are also adding something different just up in a couple of months, and it's the addition of a summary of how, not just the bids, not just, so I guess just quickly to go back to Indigenous Opportunity Considerations itself, it's essentially contractors are required to put forward a percentage of employment, training, and procurement that they're going to do with Indigenous businesses and individuals. And in the past, it used to be just a number. Now we're asking them to provide us a summary breakdown of how exactly they tend to meet that, providing more of a qualitative element to this IOC bidding process. And so we have, I mentioned, targets. We have targets for select number of key performance indicators that we can directly control ourselves. So one example is Indigenous employment, as you see here in front of you on the slide. Since we started tracking this, I believe this is 2013, we've averaged at about 21% of the total employees on site to be Indigenous employees, and this is based on person hours. Our target is between 25 and 35%. You might ask why it's a range. The range is to reflect the different phases the project is undergoing. So when we originally were developing the targets with our rights and stakeholders, we came to an agreement that the project is going to try to follow a similar model to the diamond mines, but however, the project during our period of remediation undergoes several phases of a typical mine site, which is construction, operation, and closure. So that's why the reason why we included a range, because the targets for diamond mines vary across those phases. We also have a target for northern employment, which is 55 to 70%. This northern employment target does include northern Indigenous as well. It's northern Indigenous and northern non-Indigenous, combination of the two. And since I believe we started tracking this in 2015, since then it's been around 40. We've averaged at 45%. So through Indigenous opportunity considerations, we continue to try to push contractors to employ Indigenous persons, and that's where that's one of our tools. The other tool that I'll touch on it in a little more detail later on when I get into the contracting, but that's the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses. Next slide, please. We also, for training, as you can see here, this is the 70% is what we've averaged, I believe, since 2015 for northern, which is northern non-Indigenous and Indigenous. However, similar to diamond mines, we were asked by our rights and stakeholders to create different targets for training, and those are to be scholarships and apprentices. As of this current fiscal year, we have one apprentice on site under the care maintenance contract. We are going to continue to try to encourage that as well. However, we were told by GNWT's Department of Employment, Culture, and Education that apprentices are sought after extensively by it's hard to get an apprentice essentially, so we don't want to try to limit contractors by including mandatory apprentices in our contracts. However, we continue to work with DCE to see how we can encourage as many use of apprentices as possible on the site. We also, a couple of things that we do to support training on the site, in addition to encouraging it through Indigenous opportunity considerations, and that's we have a community benefits agreement with the Yellowknives Dene First Nations, which was signed in 2021. In that community benefits agreement, we've agreed to continue to support the Shintinawo, which is YKDFN's training organization. I believe there's $500,000 on an annual basis that goes to the First Nation, as well as a $5,000 scholarship on an annual basis that goes to them as well. And the scholarship needs to be exclusive to any remediation work. Next slide, please. So for contracting, I mentioned procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, PSIB. It is open. It is closed only to Indigenous businesses, but it is open to any Indigenous business across Canada. So one thing we are doing in some of the more recent contracts, all thanks to the increased capacity in the region to be able to provide competitive and value-based bids on our contracts, is a regional PSIB. It's something that's has not been done by a federal government in the past. So what it is it's limited to Indigenous businesses within the area of the contract. So Giant Mine has a particular area of the contract that is a geographically restricted area, which the IOC component applies to. And this area is a combination of Montfi-Gogadenitle area from the Tlichon government, as well as the Acacia Asserted Territory. So it's a combination of the two that makes up our area of the contract. And so should Parsons determine that there's capacity to receive competitive bids on our contracts, and it could be done by Indigenous businesses, they will limit it to regional PSIB. So what you see in front of you here is a list of several contracts that are currently in place with northern Indigenous businesses. A substantial number of them are JVs, and this goes back to that capacity issue that was raised by the Giant Mine Oversight Board. However, the project does not see them as a negative thing. It is an opportunity, and an opportunity needs to be grasped. And you can see here, care maintenance is broken down into underground and surface care maintenance. Underground care maintenance will eventually shut down on the site once we flood the mine site. And surface care maintenance will continue to be a significant component of remediation going forward until 2038. So you can see here that there's 2 contracts for that. And right now we have a number of contracts in place, and that are up for tender right now, so I'll go over them in a later slides. Natalie already mentioned the townsite deconstruction. There's also a site security contract, emergency medical services, surface water and groundwater monitoring, and bear monitoring as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. There's also laboratory services. There's medical laboratory services that's provided here, as well as domestic waste disposal. There's additional laboratory services contract for effluent treatment plant and pilot plant testing, sample testing, and site-wide surveying. You can see here down below the last sentence. This is since December of 2017, when Parsons took over as the main construction manager on the site. I believe this is until December of last year, 2022. 64 contracts have been issued, a value of about $189 million. 84% of those went to northern companies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So upcoming contracts, none of this is new. This has been presented at our industry day and through various sources of engagement that the project does regularly. One component is the water treatment plant. Natalie already went into significant detail on that. I can't talk about a current tender that's in process, but I can say that this process was done in 2 phases. One was a pre-qualification phase that was done, and the second phase is the actual bidding process. So only companies that pass through the first phase, the pre-qualification process, were allowed to participate in the second phase. And the second phase is close to completion, and Natalie already gave the dates for that contract. Surface care and maintenance is also something that's going to be going out. It is definitely one of our flagship contracts, just because of the fact that we're expecting to receive pretty strong bids from the local region on this contract, and capacity has grown substantially to the point where we're anticipating for this contract to be a regional PSIB, our first regional PSIB contract. There's also site security, legacy debris piles. There's a variety of piles around the site that need to be collected. And that will be done, I believe, 2023, tender process. Work will be done between, I believe, 2024, 2025. There's also investigative drilling. Again, we spoke about drilling needing to be done on the site. This is to install a variety of monitors around the site to support other activities. Environmental master service agreement. This MSA is something that we're doing, is a new thing. It's the first MSA that we're going to be using. Essentially what it is it's almost like a standing offer with the federal government, or with this case with Parsons. It doesn't guarantee you any work. However, should there be a need arise to do on a short notice some work, those companies that are on this standing offer will be contacted to do the work. This definitely gives us the flexibility to, instead of going through an adjustment to an existing contract, it gives us an opportunity to react faster on the rising needs on the site. There's also going to be a sample drilling program. So it's, I believe that this, the tender process for this is almost complete, or closing, sorry. This is to collect arsenic samples from one of the chambers to provide to the Giant Mine Oversight Board for their research on what to do with the arsenic going forward. And then there's also an upgrade to our electrical services system station on the site. And just as a note, on the side here, on the right-hand side, you can see the Giant Mine rp.ca. That's Parsons' website, where they're providing updates on the activities they do, such as Industry Day, as well as contracts and employment with the Parsons themselves, the Parsons team. And all contracts are posted on Merck's. And that's it from the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Troyansky. Is there any further comments? Or?
I have them as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a point that Andre made. He did a technical comment, said when the mine would be flooding, but just a note, we will not be flooding the mine, for the record.
So maybe just to close, I think some of the statistics in the presentation that particularly that Andre was presenting kind of speak for themselves. And what I wanted to highlight is NWT and Canada as co-proponents fully agree and are right behind some pretty innovative procurement techniques, possibilities, things that you wouldn't have heard of 5 or 10 years ago. And I think we agree, there's always room for improvement, but kind of want to point out to committee the good work that's being undertaken now, and certainly the seriousness and the way that we're approaching these things and trying to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gannigan. I'll now open up the floor to questions, comments from committee, beginning with MLA Knuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, and I do appreciate that my experience with Giant Mine was more in the time when it was sort of viewed as this, we don't have to follow the rules and we can do what we want. And I literally had people from the management team sort of saying things like that to me. And a big part of when we did come on was bringing things into environmental compliance, like the tank registering and all of that. So I do, and even just going through this presentation, I can definitely see that there has been a lot more progress than probably the last time that I was on site, and I'm actually really excited to see things starting to move. Eric and I were talking about the fact that we've both been around this project for a really, really long time, and it was very stagnant, it felt like, for such a long time. So very excited to see all of that. I actually have a lot of sort of nerdy technical questions, which I don't really think are the scope of this this hearing. But I do want to know, and you commented a bit on it around the filling of the pits, because I know that's always sort of been a big area, and I agree with the YKDFN of leaving them not vegetated. I've done environmental site assessments were surprised. There's an oil dump in the middle of nowhere that nobody knew about, right? So I'm glad to hear that. But where will the material come from? So is the idea then that the contaminated soils will be used partially to backfill some of the pits, or the hazard, or not hazardous, but the less hazardous waste on site would then be used as backfill? But really it is a significant amount of gravel, and given costs of gravel and any sort of fill material in the north, like how is that going to not create another massive pit somewhere else? So that's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who would like to take that? Ms. Plato?
Sharon, thank you for the question. It's a great question. So each pit has a slightly different design. One of the pits will be frozen, so it will receive contaminated materials. I believe it's the B1 pit. So it will be filled with the high arsenic waste materials, the debris from the roaster material, so it won't require as much fill material. The other pits, we will be producing a lot of what we call byproduct material in the remediation. So for instance, the spillways from the tailings ponds will have a big spillway, or like a floodplain you would see in a city. It's not exactly the same, but just for reference. So that will be producing a lot of material as well. So we will be using that material to fill the pits as well. So where we can, we will use byproduct material that's required in the remediation to fill the pits. There will be still a requirement for a small amount more. So what we're proposing to do is to develop some quarries on sites that are high areas, so like rock outcrops that are knobs, and then we would just level them. So we are not planning to blast any pits to fill the pits, but we will require some quarry material from what we call like rock knobs for any excess. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Emily and Appleby?
Sure. Thank you for that, and I sort of giggling here over rock knobs, but you know, I think that's great. I mean, and when you look at Giant, we're all aware that the vegetation is missing off a lot of that area around there as a result of the years when the roaster was active. So I mean, it makes sense to, although I have to say, and I know you have a geologist sitting there, but if you get rid of the pillow basalts by the tailings foreshore area in the lake, you'll probably have every geologist in the Northwest Territories losing their minds, because all I ever heard was their very unique geologic structure, and so I was just, as more of a comment, I appreciate the issues around like the waste and the scrap, et cetera, that are on site. And I do know that with, for example, the tailings retreatment plant, which for people listening in was sort of an idea that they would reprocess tailings, get more gold out of it, but the company that wanted to do so was, I think, Australian, and didn't realize that at -40, that slurry is not going to move very well through pipes. So it's sitting there, it's a massive amount of metal. So it's my understanding that there is some economic potential for salvaging on site. And at times I would get questions as the environmental coordinator, what was going to happen to all that metal. And I know you spoke to it a bit, but that would be an area where I expect we could be putting out local contracts. So if the group could speak a bit more about the plans there, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Plato?
So I'll just address your first comment about the pillow lava. We have taken it off, like it's protected on site as an ocean. We will not be blasting any pillow lava unless it's actually, we will be putting a fence in that area, so there might be like a fence post or something, but generally. As opposed to the TRP, it will be included with all material on site, and where we can salvage, absolutely, we will recycle where we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments from committee? MLA O'Reilly?
Thanks. Yeah, I guess a couple of areas of interest that, and it's probably straying a little bit from what you presented, but where are we at with the perpetual care plan? And I think that's an important component of what you need to do, but also apology and compensation. And then I actually have some socioeconomic questions. Mr. Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Who wants to take that? Ms. Plato?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the perpetual care plan, this past year we worked on getting a scope of work, a statement of work. We plan to tender it. That is coming in the coming year. We are slightly delayed on that, just based on capacity at Translation Bureau and getting our together. So we do recognize that it was a requirement of the environmental agreement that is past due. But we also have a great interest from our rights and stakeholders to participate on that. And COVID certainly did slow that down because people were not able to meet. So we certainly have it. It has not fallen off our radar, and you should see a contract going out to hire someone to develop the first draft this fiscal year, or the coming fiscal year. And then, if I may, the second question on apology and compensation. It's not directly with the project. We have separated it out so we could focus on the remediation and not get sidetracked. But I'm happy to report that the federal government has dedicated $2 million to the Yellowknife Dene First Station for them to fund their legal research and develop their proper documentation to submit to the Prime Minister. So that funding was received last year, and they have 2 years of funding. So it's with the Yellowknives right now to develop their claim. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cueto. Emily O'Reilly?
No, thanks for that. Appreciate update on those two areas. And sorry, I meant to say that I certainly appreciated, and I think I can probably say on behalf of the committee, the opportunity to visit the site last summer. That was really great. I hadn't been on site for quite some time, so it was interesting to see, the new landfill site and a few other features. So thanks for, and we got to go underground. So thank you very much for helping us do all of that. But there was a whole plethora of stats and things presented there, and I'm just wondering if you have any a way of presenting trends over time, whether you can actually go back into whatever data you have in terms of the contracts that were carried out in the past, and whether you can track trends in terms of, northern employment, Indigenous employment, and what the definitions are around that, because I think, we've got problems with the way that we define BIP in the Northwest Territories, GNWT, and, acting chair is always worried about Walmart being BIP'd. So definitions are really important, and I don't know whether you can actually go back in time and track some of this stuff in a consistent fashion, disaggregate things and, where all that statistics stuff is found. So is there the ability to do that kind of trend analysis with consistent definitions that, stakeholders are probably involved in setting some of those definitions? How do you guys do that kind of stuff, and where's that data and information found? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Toriansky?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Riley. So I agree with you. Trends are an important element when it comes to tracking key performance indicators. You probably, throughout my presentation, in addition to the plethora of stats, heard me say we tracked this in 2013, this is in 2015, and the annual report I mentioned is a snapshot of a first fiscal year. So for somebody to really understand the trends, they would have to basically pull up every single report and try to put them in a timeline. And I agree with you that it's not the most productive way of doing it. So we are, in the annual reports themselves, I believe we show a 3-year trend for all of our key indicators. But I agree with you, there's a better way to do this. And so we are currently internally working on a project what we call Matilda. It's the code name, but essentially it's a stat performance tracking tool, which will be moving away from using spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets, to a cloud-based tool that's built in-house within the Public Works, by Public Works team. And they are going to be essentially, it's a two-phased approach. First phase focuses specifically on contracts. So they have to go back to as far as 2005 to collect all those physical papers and upload them, and data entry, all that information into Matilda, which is what they're doing. The tool itself, how it looks and how it functions, is already in place. And I guess we can say we're almost at a beta phase of this website. But the data entry is where they're at right now. We're anticipating substantial progress to be made this year, 2023, and hopefully have it in place by next year, next fiscal year, 23-24. The second phase of this, Matilda, is the key performance indicator tracking itself. So all our stats that I referenced in my presentation and you would typically see in our annual report, they will be uploaded. The data entry for that, I don't anticipate would take as long as for the contracts, just because we do have all this information in the spreadsheets, and it's just a matter of uploading it on there. And hopefully that tool will give us more flexibility to not only internally to do trends and analysis, but also to present this information to the public. And we already present this information in our annual reports. It's just a matter of having it all in one website or all in one place for everybody to take a look at and have access to. So definitely working on that. And yeah, so in the second phase, the work was supposed to happen for the most part in this current fiscal year, 22-23. We had to put it on hold just due to the lack of staffing within the IT department that's working on this within PSPC, but they've ensured us that the work will continue starting with next fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments from committee? MLA O'Reilly.
Thanks. Thanks for that information. I guess I want to know what GNWT is doing. And when I say GNWT, it's just not on ENR. It's also education, culture, and employment, which is supposed to be doing labor force development and tracking and all of those kinds of things. So what is GNWT actually doing to identify, skill sets, prepare inventories of jobs that are going to be created, and then ITI is supposed to be supporting small businesses. So what is ITI doing to support small businesses that could get into some of the things that Mr. Clinton talked about, where contractors, subcontractors at Giant are going to be looking to purchase things or rent equipment or whatever that the model spits out. So what is ITI doing to support businesses develop and fill some of those gaps? So I guess I want to know more about what GNWT's role is and what ECE is doing about labor force development and training, and what ITI is doing to support small businesses to make sure that we retain more of the benefits from Giant. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Canagan.
Thanks, and thanks for the question. Definitely saw it coming. I think like a lot of the conversation earlier was of a broader scale and scope than Giant Mine, and so to this point, we've responded to the questions on Giant Mine, and what you're talking about is broad scale the economy and the territory. And again, I think from a GNWT perspective, we agree we want to maximize benefits of all of the activities that are going on in our territory. I know committee is aware of the remediation economy initiative that GNWT is undertaking. It was previously led by ENR, and the reason it was led by ENR at the beginning was because we were looking at what are the remediation opportunities across the territory in all of our regions. And you'll remember there was a discussion paper that was produced that kind of showed in each region what are the key opportunities. The main area regionally was the North Slave region because of Giant, and that was previous to the increase in the estimate, but also because of the planned closure for the diamond mines in the region too. So the GNWT is definitely aware of the opportunities and the activities that are coming, and have been working through this remediation economy approach, recognizing that that's one piece of the economy and there's definitely others there. So the leadership for that file has moved from ENR to ITI with the assistance of ECE, as well as ENR was still there too. And the reason for that is, as the member has pointed out, there's a link to the economy, ITI, and to training and employment, ECE. So some of the updates that I can provide, and I guess I would suggest at a broad level, like that would be the subject of another briefing for committee that we would be happy to provide, and volunteering on behalf of other departments. One of the things that we've been working on with other departments has been strategic partnerships initiative funding, and that's been with the federal government as well. So that's a CERNAC funding model that's looking to increase opportunities for training for Indigenous and local workforce. And so we're working through creating some of those opportunities to increase the the demand side. I don't know if I have the economics right there, but looking to kind of have more people that are trained and to be operating in the workforce. Another advancement that's taken place is ECE has launched what they call the North Slave Training Hub, and it's an online platform to prepare the workforce for major project training demands. So kind of to link those that want to provide training with those that need the training. And then the last thing I would mention is that there's an engagement approach to the Remediation Economy File 2 that ITI is leading, and the plan is to go out and discuss with Indigenous governments, Indigenous organizations, and the public broadly about the remediation economy. And I will pass it to Erica to give a detail on some of the SPY funding.
Thank you, Ms. Newsmith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to get into a little bit more detail on some of the work coming out of SPY. And so the SPY has a pot of money that is available for Indigenous governments, local, municipal, territorial governments to apply, submit a proposal for a variety of areas that could help bolster the workforce. And so a couple of those that are currently underway is Aurora College is putting together a proposal to prepare for the implementation of 2 new programs that they anticipate providing, which is a Northern Technical Program and then also a Northern Remediation Monitoring Program. And so this is underway to develop that program, but that's in anticipation, hopefully, to be available the next 2 years. I don't want to commit to Aurora College to anything, but that is the hope, to start preparing for that. Also, there's a company that Canada has brought on board called Catalyst, and they are working with IGOs, Indigenous government organizations, to identify areas where capacity might need support. And so the plan there is that a specific advisor from Catalyst, the company, would work with a particular IGO and work as an advisor to help put together a proposal to apply for funding through SPY. And this is very much something that would be identified by the IGOs themselves and really supported by this advisory company. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we just learned about that just recently. And so there is work underway. And so I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to close on this one, I think one of the comments heard earlier was just making sure that the GNWT is taking this issue seriously and is organized around it and has a plan. And I definitely want to leave the committee with the impression that on the giant mine side, as folks have mentioned, we have quarterly and monthly meetings at different levels about socioeconomic through the advisory board and the working group, and annual reporting on that. On the remediation economy side, I've given you a bit of an update on where that's at. The engagement is leading to an action plan so that the GNWT will have a series of actions to take place in order to capture the benefits of the remediation economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Canagan. I'll turn it over to Emily now.
Thank you. And sometimes if you add more stuff, that spurs more questions. I'm just curious to know, how does a remediation technologist or technician vary from just an environmental technician or such? Because to me, when you're monitoring remediation, you're monitoring water and soil and air, and all of that is sort of already done. So coming back to sort of earlier comments about maybe not even labeling things that are parts of our economy as remediation economy, why wouldn't it just become an environmental tech program? How is it different? Thank you.
Anyone know Ms. Nyerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to answer that, but in no way are we trying to pigeonhole anyone through training to just focus on a remediation economy. We have an active mining economy here, and you know, I think the hope is that it's just providing more opportunities for students to educate themselves and get into this industry that hopefully then can, you know, support other sectors. And I'll just add actually on that, I know that ECE is also working with their career, I'm not sure the exact terminology for there, but career educational support folks who spend time working with students and going into schools and talking about you know, future career opportunities for students, and so, you know, that is something that EC has informed us on, that they are looking to ensure that people are aware of the upcoming work in remediation economy, but in general, you know, the economies that are relatable, mining, other construction projects, and things like that. So that's encouraging to hear that that EC has that lens to target students. You know, forecasting a lot of these major projects coming down the pipe.
Thank you. Are there any MLA Knuckleby?
Just to very quickly follow up on that, one thing I did really enjoy when I was working at Giant was when we would have the students come on site, and like the young students too, not just, you know, people that are at university level, but like they were bringing kids in from like Wati and different places so that they could get that exposure. And then just thinking further about the 800 thermosiphons, well, mining tourism is something that, you know, is being talked about, and I think that, you know, there is a way that perhaps in the future that Giant Mine becomes, you know, we look at that as something that people would actually come here to see and see what we're doing and what we've done and the innovation, and, you know, how a terrible legacy has hopefully by that point economically benefited the people of the region. So more of a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from committee? We are now approaching the 2-hour mark of this briefing, so I would like to thank all of our presenters, anyone who is tuning in today, and with that, I will end the public broadcast. Committee will take a 5-minute break and then go on camera.